Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The Harlem Jazz Club pulsed with life, its air thick with the scent of bourbon cigarette smoke and a faint whisper of jasmine perfume. Neon lights, red, blue, and green, flickered across the walls, casting jagged shadows over the crowd, packed shoulder to shoulder. A saxophone wailed its notes, curling like tendrils of smoke, weaving through the laughter and the clink of glasses. Aisha Coleman stood at the heart of it, her black silk dress hugging her curves, her natural curls cascading over her shoulders. Her brown eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the room. She wasn't here for the music or the vibe. She was here to play a role. Marcus Reed's fake girlfriend, a deal she'd struck to save her brother Jamal. But when her gaze locked with Marcus's across the hazy neon-lit room, her pulse quickened, and the line between pretense and truth blurred into something dangerous. Marcus leaned against the bar, his navy suit tailored to perfection, a single strand of dark brown hair falling over his forehead, his blue eyes cold as steel, yet burning with intensity, held her like a vice. He was a man who commanded every space he entered, a CEO whose name alone opened doors and silenced rooms. Tonight, though, he was on the ropes, a financial scandal threatening to sink Reed Enterprises, and Aisha was his lifeline. She felt the weight of every stare in the club, some curious, some cutting. A black girl from Harlem in a world of power and privilege. She squared her shoulders, her pride blazing brighter than the neon, refusing to shrink. The music slowed its rhythm, sultry and heavy, and Marcus crossed the room in 3 long strides. The crowd parted for him, sensing the authority in his step. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she caught the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and bergamot, rich and intoxicating. "You're holding up your end, Aisha," he murmured, his voice low, a velvet blade that sent a shiver down her spine. "But you're making it damn hard to keep mine." Her breath caught. The deal was clear. She'd pose as his girlfriend to deflect the press, and he'd cover Jamal's medical bills. No touching, no complications, and she could walk away any time. But the way his eyes traced her face, lingering on her lips, set her skin ablaze. "Don't cross that line, Reed," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. "I'm here for Jamal, not your games." He smirked, a flicker of challenge in his gaze, and extended his hand. "Dance with me. It's part of the show." She hesitated, her heart thumping, then slid her hand into his. His grip was warm, firm, sending a jolt through her. As he pulled her onto the dance floor, the saxophone wove its spell, and their bodies moved in sync, too close, too electric. His hand settled on her waist, fingers grazing the silk. Each touch, a spark that threatened to ignite. The neon lights swept over them, painting her skin in crimson and sapphire, her curls catching the glow like a halo. Her pulse matched the music's rhythm, and when his lips brushed her ear, whispering, "You're a fire I can't put out," she felt it, danger, desire, a pull that could unravel her. Their faces were inches apart, his breath hot against her cheek, the world narrowing to the heat of his hand, the pulse of the saxophone, the way his eyes dared her to let go. She tilted her head, her lips grazing his jaw, a fleeting defiance of her own rules. The air crackled, and for a heartbeat she forgot. The crowd, forgot the deal, forgot the promise she'd made to her mama on her deathbed. Only give your heart to someone you truly love. But reality slammed back. She pushed against his chest, breaking the spell. "I said no touching," she snapped, her voice trembling with the effort to hold herself together. "Don't make me walk away." Marcus's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something deeper, respect maybe, or a hunger he couldn't hide. He stepped back, hands raised in surrender. Your rules, Aisha. But you can't deny what just happened. She didn't respond, turning away to hide the flush creeping up her neck. The neon lights felt harsher now, exposing her vulnerability. She was Aisha Coleman, forged in the streets of Harlem, not some piece in his chess game. But as she wove through the crowd, his gaze burned into her back, a promise of trouble. She wasn't sure she could escape. 3 weeks earlier, rain poured over Harlem, turning the streets into rivers of mud and neon reflections. Aisha trudged through it, her worn sneakers soaked her hoodie clinging to her frame. The coffee shop on Lenox Avenue was a warm beacon in the storm, its windows fogged up, the radio blasting Aretha Franklin's Ain't No Way Inside. The air smelled of cornbread and roasted coffee, a slice of home in the chaos of her life. At 22, Aisha was a fighter scraping by to cover rent-dodging trouble on the block and funneling every penny into Jamal's hospital bills. Her 16-year-old brother was battling kidney disease, and every day was a war to keep him breathing. She tied her apron, her curls pulled into a messy bun, and flashed a smile for the regulars. "Yo, Miss Lena, you want the usual?" she called to an elderly woman at the counter who nodded with a grin. Aisha's warmth was her shield, but beneath it she was fraying. The hospital had called that morning, another bill, another deadline. She couldn't lose Jamal, the only family she had since Mama passed. The thought tightened her chest, but she shoved it down, focusing on the espresso machine. The bell above the door chimed, and a man stepped in, shaking rain from his coat. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face like it was chiseled from stone. Sharp jaw, piercing blue eyes. He didn't belong here. Not in his tailored suit. Not with the way he scanned the room like he owned it. Aisha pegged him as some Wall Street suit lost in Harlem. "What can I get you?" she asked, her tone polite but sharp. "Black coffee," he said, his voice deep steady, like it could cut through the rain. "And a minute of your time." She raised an eyebrow, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm working coffees $3. He slid a 10 across the counter, his eyes locked on hers. She rang it up, handed him change, and turned to help another customer, an old man grumbling about the weather. Aisha slipped him a free muffin, murmuring, "Stay dry, Pops." The stranger watched his expression unreadable. When the shop quieted, he spoke again. "Aisha Coleman, right?" She froze her hand on the coffee pot. Nobody knew her name unless it was bad news. Bill collectors, hospital staff, or worse. "How do you know me?" she demanded, her voice low. "I saw you at the hospital last week," he said. "With your brother, I asked around." Her jaw tightened. Jamal was her heart, and this man was stepping on sacred ground. "Get to the point," she snapped. He leaned forward, elbows on the counter, his presence filling the space. "I'm Marcus Reed. My company's in trouble. Bad press. A financial leak. I need someone to pose as my girlfriend. Clean up my image. You're perfect. In return, I'll cover Jamal's medical bills, every cent." Aisha's heart stopped. The bills were a mountain. Tens of thousands, maybe more. But this man with his cold eyes and expensive suit was a stranger. "Why me?" she asked, crossing her arms. "You could hire anyone, because you're real," he said, his voice steady. "You don't flinch. I need someone who can walk into a room full of wolves and not blink." She studied him, searching for a lie, but found only intensity. Still, she wasn't naive. Men like him didn't offer deals without strings. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch," he said. "You play the part events, photos, smiles. I pay the bills. You set the rules." She bit her lip, thinking of Jamal's tired eyes, the hospital's endless demands. "No touching," she said finally. "And I can walk away any time." He nodded, a flicker of respect in his gaze. "Deal back at the jazz club." The night turned darker when Victor Hayes strode in, his blonde hair gleaming under the lights, his smile sharp as a razor. He was all charm and poison, a man who'd lost a major deal to Marcus years ago and carried the grudge like a weapon. The crowd hushed as he raised a glass, his voice slicing through the music. "To Marcus Reed," he said, "and his new accessory. Tell me, Aisha, how much is he paying you to play this role?" The room spun. Aisha felt every eye on her, the whispers like shards of glass. Gold digger, hustler, Harlem trash, her fists clenched. But before she could speak, Cassandra Blake, a sleek reporter in a red dress, snapped a photo, her smile predatory. "This'll sell papers," Cassandra purred. Aisha's pride roared to life. She stepped forward, her voice steel. "I'm not for sale, Victor, and I'm not scared of you or your lies. You want to throw dirt? I'm from Harlem. We wrote the book on that." The crowd gasped, some clapping, but Victor's eyes narrowed, promising revenge. Marcus moved to her side, his hand hovering near her back, not touching, but close enough to feel his heat. "Enough," he said, his voice like ice. "You're done here, Victor." The man smirked, but retreated. Cassandra trailing him like a shadow. Aisha's heart pounded as she pushed through the crowd, needing air. Outside, the Harlem night was alive. Car horns, laughter, the faint thump of hip-hop from a passing car. She leaned against the brick wall, the neon sign buzzing above her. Marcus followed his presence, a quiet storm. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "But you did." She turned, her eyes blazing. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. You pulled me into this world, Marcus. But you don't get to define me." He stepped closer, his breath misting in the cool air. "I know who you are, Aisha. You're fire. And I'm not sure I can stay away." Her pulse raced, the memory of their dance flooding back, the heat, the neon, the way his touch had set her alight. But she thought of Mama, of Jamal, of the promise she'd sworn to keep. "Then try harder," she said, her voice breaking. She walked away, her silhouette fading into the Harlem night, leaving Marcus staring after her, his heart caught in a trap he hadn't seen coming. The San Francisco night was a dream, woven in silver fog, curling through the city like a soft exhale. From the rooftop garden of the Fairmont Hotel, the Golden Gate Bridge shimmered in the distance, its red towers slicing through the mist. The air was sharp with the briny scent of the bay, laced with the earthy tang of pine from the garden's sculpted trees. Aisha Coleman stood at the terrace's edge, her emerald silk dress catching the moonlight, the fabric tracing her curves like a second skin. She was a stranger in this world of tech tycoons and socialites, their champagne flutes glinting under crystal chandeliers. This was Marcus Reed's domain, not hers. A Harlem girl playing a part she wasn't sure she could sustain. It had been a week since the jazz club in Harlem, where she'd stared down Victor Hayes's venom and felt Marcus's touch ignite something dangerous. That night had left her rattled, her body humming with a need she couldn't name, her mind clinging to the promise she'd made to her mama. Only give your heart to someone you truly love. Marcus was a force pulling her closer with every look from those piercing blue eyes, and tonight at this charity gala in San Francisco, Aisha was determined to keep her walls up. But as she gripped the railing, the city lights blurring below, she felt the weight of his presence before she saw him. Marcus appeared at her side, a glass of red wine in one hand, his navy suit unbuttoned just enough to hint at the strength beneath. The fog softened his sharp jaw, but his gaze was unrelenting, pinning her in place like a moth to a flame. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice low, a velvet thread laced with concern. "Hiding from me or the crowd. Aisha tilted her head, her curls swaying, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Maybe both," she said, crossing her arms. "This place is all glitz and no soul. I'm not here for the sparkle." Her tone was playful, but her eyes held steel. She was here for Jamal, her brother, not for Marcus's world of wealth and whispers. He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking, his cologne sandalwood and bergamot wrapping around her like a dare. "You're here for Jamal," he said, his voice softening. "But I'm hoping you're starting to see me." Her breath hitched. He wasn't supposed to say things like that, wasn't supposed to make her chest tighten with something she wasn't ready to name. She turned toward the bay, avoiding his gaze. "Let's keep it simple, Reed. Stick to the deal." But simple was a lie when he touched her arm, his fingers grazing her skin, warm and deliberate, sending a spark through her. "Walk with me," he murmured, nodding toward a secluded corner of the garden. Against every instinct screaming to stay put, she followed her heels clicking on the stone path. The crowd's chatter faded, replaced by the rustle of pine needles and the faint lapping of waves from the bay. They stopped beneath a canopy of fairy lights, the glow painting Aisha's face in soft gold, highlighting the fire in her brown eyes, the curve of her cheekbones. Marcus set his glass on a stone table, his eyes locked on hers. "You were fearless in Harlem," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "The way you shut Victor down. I've never seen anyone own a room like that." The words hit her hard, cracking the armor she'd built. She wanted to brush it off to keep him at arm's length, but his sincerity was a blade slicing through her defenses. "Don't try to sweet-talk me," she said, but her voice wavered, betraying her. "I did what I had to. You don't get it, Marcus. When people look at me here, they see a girl from the hood, not a person." She thought of the jazz club, the sting of Cassandra Blake's camera flash, the whispers that cut deeper than knives. Harlem had taught her to stand tall, but it hadn't prepared her for a man who saw her and didn't flinch. "I get it more than you think," he said, stepping closer. The fairy lights danced in his eyes, turning them a softer blue. "Like the bay at dusk, I've been called a monster, a machine, but you make me want to be human." His hand lifted, hovering near her face, waiting. Her heart pounded the air thick with pine and his scent. She should have walked away, should have remembered her rules, but her body was a traitor. She nodded a small, trembling motion, and his fingers brushed her cheek, slow and deliberate like he was tracing a sacred map. The touch was a quiet fire spreading heat from her face to her core. He leaned in, his lips grazing her neck just below her ear. Each kiss, a pulse that echoed in her veins. "Aisha," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. "Tell me to stop." Her hands found his chest, fingers curling into his shirt, feeling the steady thump of his heart. The world shrank to the glow of the lights, the rustle of the trees, the way his touch made her feel alive. She tilted her head, giving him more, and his kisses trailed lower to the hollow of her throat. The silk of her dress was nothing under his hands, which slid to her waist, pulling her closer. "Marcus," she murmured, her voice a tangle of warning and want. "We shouldn't." But they could, and that was the danger. Her mama's promise loomed a weight in her mind, but so did the truth. She wanted him more than she'd ever wanted anyone. His lips hovered near hers, their breaths mingling the tension, a living thing. Then a branch snapped nearby and the spell shattered. Aisha pulled back her chest, heaving her eyes wide. "I can't," she said, stepping away, her voice breaking. "Not like this. Not when I don't know what you want." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. "I want you," he said, his voice rough with restraint. "But I'll wait, Aisha. As long as it takes." She turned away, her hands trembling, the fairy lights blurring through unshed tears. She was still Aisha Coleman, still bound by her promise, But Marcus was a tide pulling her under, and she wasn't sure she could stay afloat. The next morning, Aisha sat in her hotel room, the San Francisco skyline sprawling beyond the window. The fog had lifted, revealing the bay's endless blue, but her mind was a tempest. Her phone buzzed, and Keisha Brooks's face lit up the screen. Aisha answered, desperate for an anchor. "Girl, you holding up?" Keisha's voice was warm, dripping with Harlem sass. "I saw those headlines. That Cassandra Blake's out here calling you a gold digger. You need me to hop a plane and shut her down." Aisha laughed, the sound loosening the knot in her chest. Keisha, her ride or die, since they were kids, was a hurricane. 24 with a sharp tongue and a chair at a Harlem hair salon. "I'm good, Keisha," Aisha said, though it was half a lie. "Just trying to keep my head straight." Keisha said, unconvinced. "And how's Mr. CEO? You still playing his game?" Aisha hesitated, the memory of Marcus's touch flooding back his hands, his lips the way he'd made her forget the world. "It's messy," she admitted. "He's not what I thought," Keisha snorted. "Messy means trouble." "You're Harlem's finest, Aisha. Don't let him dim your shine." They talked for a while, Keisha's tales of salon drama and Harlem nights pulling Aisha back to her roots. But when they hung up, the weight returned. Cassandra's lies were spreading, painting Aisha as a hustler, and the gala tonight would only make it worse. A knock at the door jolted her. She opened it to find Darius Moore. Jamal's doctor standing there in a crisp blazer, his dark eyes warm but cautious. At 28, Darius was a rising star at the Harlem hospital, a black man who'd clawed his way up, just like her Darius, Aisha said, surprised. "What you doing in San Francisco medical conference?" he said, his smile easy. "Heard you were here. Figured I'd check in. Jamal's doing all right, stable for now." Relief flooded her, but Darius's expression shifted. "Saw you with Reed last night? You sure about him, Aisha? I've seen him at events before. Guy's got a rep." Her stomach twisted. "What kind?" she asked, bracing herself. Darius hesitated. "Cold, ruthless. Tied to some shady deals. I care about you. You deserve better." His words were soft, but they cut deep. She thanked him, promising to stay sharp, but as he left, doubt crept in. Was Marcus playing her? Or was Darius seeing something she couldn't? That evening at the gala's closing dinner, Aisha stood by Marcus's side, her smile polished, but her heart heavy. The ballroom was a vision of wealth, gold chandeliers, white linens, the clink of crystal glasses. Marcus's hand rested lightly on her back, a quiet anchor, but she felt the eyes on her, the whispers fueled by Cassandra's venom. Gold digger hustler. She wanted to shout, to tell them she was here for Jamal, not for penthouses or pearls, but pride kept her head high, her gaze unflinching. Marcus leaned in, his breath brushing her ear. "You're tense," he said. "What's going on?" She turned, meeting his eyes, searching for truth. "Do you trust me?" she asked, her voice low. "Or am I just a fix for your problems?" He frowned, his hand falling away. "You're not a fix, Aisha. You're—" He paused, searching for words. "You're the only thing that feels real in this mess." Her heart skipped, but Darius's warning lingered. Before she could respond, Cassandra approached her. Red lips curved in a smirk. "Such a cute couple," she purred, her camera flashing. "The tabloids will love this." Aisha's temper flared, but Marcus spoke first, his voice like ice. "Leave, Cassandra. You're out of moves." The reporter laughed, sauntering off, but the damage was done. Aisha pulled away from Marcus, her voice sharp. "You brought me here, but you don't get it. Every time they call me a gold digger, it's not just gossip. It's my name, my pride, my life. Marcus's eyes softened, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. I screwed up, he said. I should have told you everything about the scandal about Victor. But I'm telling you now I need you, Aisha. Not just for this. For me. His honesty hit her like a wave. But it wasn't enough. She thought of Jamal, of Mama, of the promise she was inches from breaking. I need time, she said, turning away, her heels echoing on the marble. As she stepped into the San Francisco night, the fog enveloped her like a shield. The city's lights blurred, and she felt the pull of her choices. Marcus was a risk, a fire that could consume her. But as she stood by the bay, the waves whispering secrets, she wondered if she was already too deep to turn back. The Miami night was a fever dream, ablaze with neon and pulsing with life. On Ocean Drive, South Beach, the air hummed with the salty tang of the Atlantic, the sweet bite of mojitos, and the relentless beat of reggaeton spilling from open-air clubs. Palm trees swayed under strings of pink and purple lights, their shadows dancing across the Art Deco facades. Aisha Coleman stood on the rooftop of a sleek hotel, her silver dress catching the glow of lanterns, the fabric shimmering against her skin like liquid moonlight. The city's energy was electric, but it couldn't drown out the storm in her chest. She was still playing Marcus Reed's fake girlfriend, a role that felt more real with every stolen glance, every brush of his hand. But after San Francisco, after that moment in the garden, his lips on her neck, her heart teetering on the edge, she was losing her grip on the rules she'd set. A week had passed since the gala, since Keisha's warnings and Darius's doubts had planted seeds of mistrust. Aisha had tried to keep Marcus at arm's length, to focus on Jamal's hospital bills, to honor her mama's promise. Only give your heart to someone you truly love. But Marcus was a current pulling her under, and Miami's heat was making it harder to resist tonight at a high-stakes conference for Reed Enterprises. She was supposed to smile, charm the investors, and keep the press at bay. Instead, she felt like a tightrope walker, one misstep from falling. Marcus appeared beside her, his black suit unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a sliver of tanned skin. The rooftop lanterns cast golden flecks in his blue eyes, softening their usual steel, but not their intensity. He held 2 drinks, whiskey for him, sparkling water for her, and offered one with a half-smile. "You're a million miles away," he said, his voice low, cutting through the music. "What's got you so quiet?" Aisha took the glass, her fingers brushing his, the contact sending a spark up her arm. "This city," she said, dodging the truth. "It's loud, flashy, doesn't leave room for thinking." She sipped the water, her eyes scanning the crowd. Suits and sequins, laughter and deals, all part of Marcus's world, a world where she was still an outsider, no matter how well she played the part. He stepped closer, his shoulder grazing hers, the heat of him, a contrast to the ocean breeze. "You don't have to think tonight," he said. "Just be here with me." His words were a dare, and her pulse quickened. She wanted to snap back to remind him of their deal. No touching, no strings, but the memory of San Francisco, of his hands on her waist, his breath on her skin made her waver. "Careful. Reed," she said, her voice softer than she meant. "You're playing with fire." His smirk was pure trouble. "Maybe I like getting burned." Before she could respond, the music shifted, a reggaeton beat that thrummed through the rooftop, urging bodies to move. Marcus set his glass down and offered his hand. "Dance with me, Aisha." One song for the show. Her heart pounded, but she couldn't say no. Not with the crowd watching, not with the way his eyes held her captive. She took his hand, and he pulled her into the fray. The dance floor was a sea of motion bodies, swaying under the lanterns, the neon skyline pulsing in the distance. Marcus's hand found her waist, his grip firm, guiding her to the rhythm. The music was a heartbeat, loud and relentless, drowning out everything but the heat between them. Aisha's hips moved with the beat, her dress catching the light, her curls bouncing with each step. His eyes never left hers, dark with want, and when he spun her, pulling her back against his chest, the world tilted. His breath was hot against her ear, his hands sliding to her hips, fingers pressing just enough to make her gasp. The lanterns cast golden shadows across her skin, and the music swallowed their heartbeats, fusing them into one. "Aisha," he murmured, his lips grazing her temple. "You're killing me." Her body responded before her mind could, leaning into him, her hands gripping his arms. The neon lights blurred. The crowd faded, and for a moment it was just them. His touch, her pulse, the rhythm driving them closer. She turned in his arms, their faces inches apart, her lips hovering near his. The air crackled, charged with a need she couldn't deny. She wanted to kiss him, to let go, to break every rule she'd set. But her mama's promise flashed in her mind, and she froze. Her breath ragged. "Marcus," she whispered. "We can't." He didn't let go, his eyes searching hers, raw and unguarded. "Tell me you don't feel this," he said, his voice rough. "Tell me and I'll stop." She opened her mouth, but the lie wouldn't come. Instead, she pushed away her chest, heaving the music suddenly too loud, the lights too bright. "I need air," she said, turning toward the edge of the rooftop, her hands trembling. Marcus watched her go, his jaw tight, a man caught between restraint and desire. The conference hall was a different beast, polished marble glass walls and the hum of power deals. Aisha stood by Marcus's side. Her smile practiced her silver dress, a beacon among the suits. Investors nodded, charmed by her warmth. But she felt Victor haze before she saw him. He strode in blonde hair, gleaming his smile a blade. Victor was Marcus's shadow, a rival who'd lost $1 billion deal to him years ago and never recovered. His presence was a warning, and Aisha's gut twisted. Victor approached, his voice smooth as venom. "Aisha, you're a vision," he said, his eyes raking over her. "But let's be real. How much is Reed paying you to play this part?" The words hit like a slap, echoing the whispers from Harlem. Marcus stiffened, but Aisha stepped forward, her voice ice. "I'm not your pawn, Victor, and I'm not here for your games. Try me, and you'll regret it." Victor's smile didn't waver, but his eyes darkened. "Bold words," he said, "but you're in over your head." He turned to Marcus, his tone mocking. "Your empire's crumbling, Reed, and your little girlfriend won't save you." Marcus's hand clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Get out, Victor. You're embarrassing yourself." Victor laughed, sauntering off, but the air felt heavier, charged with his threat. Aisha's phone buzzed as she stepped away, her heart still racing. It was a text from an unknown number with a photo of her at the Harlem Jazz Club, her face lit by neon. The message read, "Leave Reed or Jamal pays the price." Her blood ran cold. She scanned the room, half expecting to see Victor's smirk, but he was gone. Her mind raced to Jamal alone in the hospital, vulnerable. She deleted the message, her hands shaking, but the fear lingered. Later, in a quiet corner of the hotel bar, Aisha sipped water, trying to steady herself. Marcus joined her, his expression unreadable. "You handled Victor like a pro," he said, but his eyes searched hers. "What's wrong? And don't say nothing." She hesitated, the text burning in her mind, but she couldn't tell him not yet. "Just tired." She lied, her voice flat. "This world of yours? It's a lot." He leaned closer, his voice low. "You don't have to do this alone, Aisha. Let me in." His sincerity cracked her resolve, but the threat to Jamal was a wall she couldn't breach. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "Not now." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away the memory of their dance, his hands, his heat too much to bear. The next morning, Aisha sat in her hotel room, the Miami skyline glittering beyond the window, its beauty a cruel contrast to her turmoil. Her phone rang and Darius Moore's name lit up the screen. She answered, desperate for news. "Aisha." Darius set his voice tight. "Jamal's okay, but someone was asking about him at the hospital. A guy. No name, just questions. I've got security watching, but you need to be careful." Her heart stopped. The text wasn't a bluff. Victor was coming for her, and Jamal was his leverage. "Thanks, Darius," she said, her voice hollow. "Keep him safe." She hung up her hands, trembling, and made a decision. She couldn't stay here, couldn't let Marcus's world destroy her brother. She packed her bag, her movements mechanical, and left a note for Marcus. "I'm sorry, I can't do this." She caught a cab to the airport, the Miami heat pressing against her skin, the neon lights fading in the rear view. Her phone buzzed, Marcus calling, but she silenced it, tears stinging her eyes. She thought of her mama, of the promise she'd nearly broken, of Jamal's smile, the only thing keeping her grounded. Leaving Marcus hurt. A raw ache in her chest, but staying was a risk she couldn't take. As the cab sped through the city, the reggaeton beats echoing in her mind, Aisha wondered if she was running from Victor, or from the fire Marcus had sparked inside her. The Memphis night was warm and heavy, steeped in the smoky scent of barbecue and the soulful hum of blues drifting from Beale Street. Neon signs glowed in shades of indigo and gold, their lights spilling across the cobblestone sidewalks, where street musicians strummed guitars and sang of love and loss. Aisha Coleman sat in a corner booth at a dimly lit blues joint, her denim jacket loose over a simple white dress. Her curls pulled into a low bun. The air was thick with the aroma of pecan pie and whiskey, a comfort that couldn't quite ease the ache in her chest. She'd fled Miami 2 days ago, leaving Marcus Reed and his glittering, dangerous world behind to protect her brother Jamal. But the distance hadn't dulled the memory of his touch, his voice, the fire he'd sparked in her. She was still bound by her mama's promise. Only give your heart to someone you truly love. But Marcus was a ghost she couldn't shake. Aisha had come to Memphis to find refuge with Aunt Ruby, her mother's sister, whose small wooden house by the Mississippi River was a haven of gospel records and home-cooked meals. Ruby, at 50, was a pillar of warmth and wisdom, her laughter as rich as the gumbo she made. But even Ruby's comfort couldn't quiet the storm in Aisha's mind. Victor Hayes's threat. "Leave Reed or Jamal pays the price" had driven her from Miami, and Darius Moore's warning about a stranger at the hospital had confirmed her fears. She'd left Marcus a note, a coward's goodbye, but the weight of it pressed on her. She wasn't just running from Victor. She was running from herself, from the way Marcus made her feel alive, wanted, seen. The blues singer's voice rose raw and haunting, pulling Aisha from her thoughts. She sipped her sweet tea, the ice clinking softly, and tried to focus on the music, but then the door swung open and her heart stopped. Marcus Reed stood in the doorway, his black coat dusted with Memphis grit, his blue eyes scanning the room until they found her. The crowd didn't part for him here. Not like in Harlem or Miami, but his presence was a force quiet and undeniable. He crossed the room, ignoring the curious glances, and slid into the booth across from her. "Aisha," he said, his voice low, rough with something that sounded like pain. "You can't keep running from me." Her breath caught her hands tightening around her glass. "I'm not running," she lied, her voice sharper than she meant. "I'm protecting Jamal. Your world's too dangerous, Marcus. I told you I was out." But even as she spoke, her body betrayed her, leaning toward him, drawn to the heat in his gaze. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes searching hers. "I read your note," he said. "I'm sorry. Doesn't cut it, Aisha. You think I don't know what danger looks like. Victor's coming for me. Not you. But I can't fight him if you're gone." His honesty disarmed her, cracking the wall she'd built. She wanted to tell him about the text, about the fear gnawing at her, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she shook her head. "You don't get it. This isn't just about you. It's about my family. My promise." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I get it more than you think. I've lost people, Aisha. I know what it's like to carry that weight, but I'm here in Memphis in a dive bar I'd never step foot in because I can't lose you." His voice broke on the last word, and her heart stuttered. She'd expected anger control, not this raw vulnerability. The blues singer hit a high note, the sound wrapping around them, and for a moment the world was just the two of them, caught in a fragile truce. Aunt Ruby's voice cut through the tension, warm and teasing. "This the fancy man you been hiding from, baby girl?" She stood by the booth, her apron dusted with flour, her dark eyes twinkling. Aisha flushed, but Marcus stood offering his hand with a charm that felt genuine. "Marcus Reed," he said, "and you must be the woman who raised Aisha to be a force." Ruby laughed, shaking his hand. "Aunt Ruby. And don't you try sweet-talking me, boy. Sit down, have some pie, and tell me why my niece looks like she's carrying the world." Aisha shot Ruby a look, but the older woman just winked, leaving them with a slice of pecan pie and a knowing smile. Later, after the bar emptied, Marcus walked Aisha to a small back room where the owner stored extra chairs and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. The space was lit by a single oil lamp, its flame casting a warm, flickering glow across the wooden walls. The faint hum of blues seeped through the door, mingling with the distant rumble of the Mississippi. Aisha leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, trying to keep her distance. But Marcus was close, too close. His presence, a quiet storm. "Talk to me," he said, his voice soft but insistent. "Why did you leave?" She swallowed the weight of Victor's threat pressing on her. "I can't," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not safe." But his eyes, soft in the lamplight, pulled at her, and she felt the truth rising. "Someone's watching Jamal." She admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "They said if I didn't leave you, he'd get hurt. I can't lose him." "Marcus." His face hardened, but not with anger, with resolve. "Victor," he said the name, a curse. "He's trying to break me, and he's using you to do it, but I won't let him touch Jamal, I swear it." He stepped closer, his hand hovering near her face, waiting for permission. Her heart pounded, the lamp's glow painting her skin in gold, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the fire in her eyes. She nodded, and his fingers brushed her face, slow and reverent, like he was touching something sacred. The touch was a spark, igniting a fire that had been smoldering since Miami. He leaned in, his lips grazing her jaw, then her neck. Each kiss, a deliberate claim. The lamp's light flickered, casting shadows that danced across her skin, and the faint blues melody wove around them, slow and soulful. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer, the denim of her jacket rough against his palms. "Aisha," he murmured, his breath hot against her throat. "I'm not letting you go." Her hands found his chest, fingers curling into his shirt, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The world shrank to the glow of the lamp, the hum of the music, the way his touch made her feel whole. She tilted her head, giving him more, and his kisses deepened, trailing to the hollow of her collarbone. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and wood, and her body responded, arching into him, her breath hitching. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice a plea. "I want you, but I'm scared." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, his gaze raw and unguarded. "I'm scared too. he admitted, his voice rough. Scared of how much I need you. But I'm here. Aisha, I'm not running. His words broke something in her, a dam she'd built to keep her heart safe. She reached for him, her lips finding his, the kiss slow and deep, a promise unspoken. His hands roamed her back, tracing the curve of her spine, each touch a note in a song only they could hear. The lamp flickered, casting their shadows on the wall, and for a moment her mama's promise faded, replaced by the truth. She was falling and she didn't want to stop. But fear crept in, cold and sharp. She pulled back her chest, heaving, her eyes glistening. I can't break my promise, she said, her voice breaking. Not yet. Not until I know. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded, stepping back, his hands falling to his sides. I'll wait, he said, his voice thick with restraint, but I'm not giving up on us. The next morning, Aisha sat at Aunt Ruby's kitchen table, the smell of bacon and coffee filling the air. Ruby hummed a gospel tune. His eye is on the sparrow, her voice rich and soothing. Aisha stirred her coffee, her mind replaying the night before, Marcus's kiss, his promise, the way he'd looked at her like she was his world. Ruby sat across from her, her dark eyes knowing. That boy's got it bad for you, she said, cutting straight to the heart, but you're carrying more than love. Baby girl, what's eating you? Aisha hesitated, then told her everything. Victor's threat, Jamal's danger, her fear of breaking her mama's promise. Ruby listened, her face calm but fierce. Your mama wanted you to love with your whole heart, she said. But love ain't about being perfect. It's about finding someone who'll fight for you like you fight for Jamal. She reached across the table, squeezing Aisha's hand. You're strong, Aisha, but you don't have to do this alone. Her phone buzzed, and Keisha Brooks's name lit up the screen. Aisha answered, bracing herself. Girl, you okay? Keisha's voice was urgent. Darius just called. He found something, emails between Cassandra Blake and Victor. They're working together, setting you up. I'm sending you the files. Aisha's heart raced, hope sparking. Thanks, Keisha, she said. You're a lifesaver. She hung up, her mind racing. The emails could expose Victor, maybe even protect Jamal, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed Marcus not to save her, but to stand with her. She found him at a nearby diner, his coffee untouched, his eyes tired but resolute. I'm done running, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. Victor's going down, but I need you with me. Not as a boss, not as a savior, as my partner. Marcus's eyes lit up, a rare smile breaking through. You've got me, Aisha. All in. He reached for her hand, his grip steady, and she felt it a shift, a promise of something real, as they planned their next move, a confrontation in Portland. She thought of Ruby's words, of her mama's promise, and of the man sitting across from her. For the first time, she wasn't just fighting for Jamal. She was fighting for herself, and maybe, just maybe, for a love worth breaking every rule. The Portland night was a restless murmur, draped in a fine mist that clung to the city like a second skin. From the rooftop of a sleek conference center overlooking the Willamette River, the skyline glowed with muted lights, their reflections shimmering on the water's surface. The air was sharp with the scent of rain-soaked cedar and the faint, earthy aroma of coffee drifting from nearby cafes. Aisha Coleman stood at the edge of the rooftop, her deep burgundy dress catching the soft glow of string lights, the fabric molding to her curves like a whispered promise. Her curls were loose, framing her face, and her brown eyes burned with a fire that hadn't dimmed since Memphis. She was no longer running. Not from Victor Hayes, not from Marcus Reed, and not from the truth of her own heart. But tonight at this high-stakes conference for Reed Enterprises, she was walking into a battlefield, and the stakes were higher than ever. It had been 3 days since Memphis, since Aunt Ruby's kitchen, and Marcus's vow to stand by her as a partner, not a savior. The emails Keisha and Darius had uncovered, proof of Victor and Cassandra Blake's collusion to frame Aisha and sabotage Marcus, were her weapon, but wielding it would take everything she had. Victor's threat still loomed a shadow over Jamal's safety and Aisha's mama's promise. Only give your heart to someone you truly love was a tether she was ready to test. Marcus was no longer just a deal, a risk, or a fire. He was a man who'd crossed the country for her, who'd bared his soul in a Memphis dive bar, and she was starting to believe he might be worth breaking every rule. Marcus appeared beside her, his black suit sharp, but slightly rumpled as if he'd been pacing. The mist clung to his dark hair, and his blue eyes held a storm-resolved worry, and something deeper, something that made her pulse race. He handed her a glass of sparkling water, his fingers brushing hers. The contact, a quiet spark. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice low, steady, but laced with tension. "Victor's here, and he's not going down easy." Aisha met his gaze, her chin lifting. "I was born ready," she said, a Harlem edge to her voice. "Victor wants a fight. He's about to get one." Her confidence wasn't just bravado. It was forged in the streets, in hospital, waiting rooms, in every moment she'd fought for Jamal. But beneath it, fear flickered. Not for herself, but for what this night could cost. He stepped closer, his shoulder grazing hers, the warmth of him cutting through the damp air. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice softening. "We're in this together." Her heart skipped, and for a moment she let herself believe it. Believe in them. But before she could respond, the conference doors opened and the crowd spilled onto the rooftop, their chatter mingling with the patter of rain. It was time. The conference hall was a fortress of glass and steel, its high ceilings amplifying the hum of power plays and clinking glasses. Aisha stood by Marcus's side. Her smile polished her burgundy dress, a beacon among the suits. Investors nodded, drawn to her warmth. But the air shifted when Victor Hayes entered, his blonde hair slicked back, his smile a predator's grin. Cassandra Blake trailed him, her red dress stark against the muted tones, her camera ready to strike. Aisha's grip on Marcus's arm tightened, but she kept her face calm, her pride a shield. Victor approached, his voice dripping with mock charm. "Aisha, Marcus, the perfect couple," he said, his eyes raking over her. "But let's cut the act. Everyone knows she's just a prop to save your sinking ship." The words were a blade echoing the Harlem whispers, and Aisha felt the crowd's eyes on her, waiting for her to crack. Marcus's jaw clenched, but Aisha stepped forward, her voice steel. "You're out of moves, Victor. Keep talking and you'll bury yourself." Victor's smile faltered, but he recovered, turning to the crowd. "Let's see what the evidence says," he said, signaling a screen to light up. A video played grainy footage of Aisha seemingly accepting money from Victor in a dark alley. Gasps rippled through the room, and Cassandra's camera flashed, capturing the moment. The board members murmured, their faces grim, and Aisha felt the ground shift beneath her. It was fake, a lie stitched together to destroy her, but it looked real enough to ruin everything. Marcus stepped forward, his voice like thunder. "This is a setup, and you know it, Victor." But the damage was done. A board member, a stern woman in a gray suit, approached Marcus. "End this, Reed," she said. "Cut ties with her, or you're out." Aisha's heart pounded, but she refused to break. She thought of Jamal, of Aunt Ruby, of the emails in her pocket, proof that could turn the tide. Before she could act, Marcus took her hand, his grip steady, and faced the crowd. "Aisha's not going anywhere," he said, his voice unwavering. "She's the only real thing in this room, and I'd rather lose everything than lose her." The words hit her like a wave cracking the last of her defenses. She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from him, and stepped forward. "I'm not done," she said, her voice ringing clear. "Victor, Cassandra, you think you can break me with lies. I'm Aisha Coleman, and I'm about to end this." She pulled out her phone, projecting the emails Keisha and Darius had sent, proof of Victor and Cassandra's plot, their payments, their forged video. The crowd fell silent, then erupted in whispers as the truth sank in. Victor's face paled, and Cassandra's camera dropped her smirk. "Gone. You're finished," Aisha said. Her eyes locked on Victor. "And I'm just getting started." Security moved in, escorting Victor and Cassandra out as the board members scrambled to apologize. Aisha stood tall, her heart racing, but Marcus's hand in hers grounded her. They'd won, but the victory felt hollow. The board's ultimatum still hung over Marcus, and Jamal's safety wasn't guaranteed. As the crowd dispersed, Aisha pulled Marcus aside, her voice low. "We beat them, but I need to know, do you trust me? Not as a partner in this fight, but as me." His eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through. "I trust you, Aisha, with everything I am." His words were a lifeline, but she needed more than words. She needed him. Later, in Marcus's hotel suite, the rain battered the floor-to-ceiling windows, a relentless drumbeat that matched the storm in Aisha's chest. The room was bathed in the green-blue glow of the river, the light casting shadows across her burgundy dress, her skin, her curls. Marcus stood by the window, his shirt unbuttoned, his eyes locked on her. "You were incredible tonight," he said, his voice rough with awe. "You didn't just save me. You saved yourself." Aisha crossed the room, her heels silent on the plush carpet, stopping inches from him. "I didn't do it alone," she said, her voice trembling. "You stood by me, Marcus. That's what got me through." The rain roared outside, a wild counterpoint to the quiet between them. She reached for him, her fingers brushing his chest, feeling the heat of his skin through his shirt. He caught her hand, his grip gentle but firm, and pulled her closer. The air crackled, charged with a need that had been building since Harlem. He leaned in his lips, capturing hers, the kiss fierce and hungry, a release of everything they'd held back. The rain's rhythm drowned out their breaths, but each touch was a sound of its own. His hands sliding to her hips, her fingers tangling in his hair. The green-blue light painted her skin, highlighting the curve of her neck, the rise of her chest. His kisses trailed to her jaw, her throat, each one a spark that set her alight. "Aisha," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "I need you." Her body arched into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, the rain a symphony outside. The burgundy dress felt like nothing under his hands, which roamed her back, tracing her spine. She wanted to let go to break her mama's promise, but doubt flickered. Could she trust him with her heart? "Marcus," she whispered, her voice raw. "I love you, but I can't lose myself." He pulled back, his eyes searching hers, his breath ragged. "You won't," he said, his voice fierce. "You're Aisha Coleman, and I love every inch of you. Your fire, your heart, your fight. I'm not asking you to lose anything. I'm asking you to let me in." His words shattered her last defenses, and she kissed him again, softer, deeper, a promise of her own. They held each other, the rain a curtain around them, And for the first time, Aisha felt whole, not just a sister, a fighter, but a woman in love. The next morning, Aisha sat in a Portland coffee shop, the smell of roasted beans and damp wood, grounding her. Keisha and Darius had flown in their faces, a mix of relief and pride. "Girl, you shut it down," Keisha said, her grin wide. "Victor's done and Cassandra's career is toast." Darius nodded, his eyes warm but cautious. "Jamal's safe," he said. "I've got people watching him, but you need to stay sharp." Aisha smiled, her heart lighter but still heavy with questions. She looked at Marcus, sitting across from her, his coffee untouched, his eyes never leaving her. "We won," she said, her voice steady. "But I need to know, Marcus, will you love me as me, not as some prize you fought for?" He reached for her hand, his grip steady, his voice unwavering. "You're not a prize, Aisha. You're my home, and I'll spend every day proving it." His words were a vow, and she believed him. But as they planned their return to Brooklyn to build a future together, Aisha knew the fight wasn't over. Victor's arrest was a victory, but the world still watched, and her heart was a battlefield. She thought of her mama, of Jamal, of the promise she'd nearly broken, and realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing to fight together. The Brooklyn evening was a tapestry of golden light, the setting sun casting a warm glow over Dumbo's cobblestone streets. From the rooftop of a community center nestled near the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan skyline glittered across the East River, its lights twinkling like stars against the deepening sky. The air was rich with the scent of roasted coffee from nearby cafes, the faint tang of river water, and the sweet warmth of fresh-baked cornbread wafting from the center's kitchen. Aisha Coleman stood at the center of the rooftop, her white linen dress flowing softly against her skin, her curls loose and catching the breeze. Her brown eyes shone with a quiet pride, a far cry from the fear that had once defined her. Tonight was more than a charity event for Harlem's youth. It was a testament to her journey, a celebration of love, family, and the fire that had carried her through. It had been a week since Portland, since Aisha had faced down Victor Hayes and Cassandra Blake, exposing their lies and saving Marcus Reed's company and herself. The victory had been hard-won, but it was Marcus's vow in that rain-soaked hotel suite, "You're my home," that had shifted everything. Aisha had spent months wrestling with her mama's promise. Only give your heart to someone you truly love. Now standing in Brooklyn, surrounded by the people she loved, she knew she'd found that someone. Marcus wasn't just a man who'd fought for her. He was the one who'd stood beside her, who'd seen her as an equal, and she was ready to build a future with him. The rooftop was alive with music and laughter, a blend of hip-hop and soul pulsing from speakers, kids from the community center running through the crowd with bright smiles. Keisha Brooks, in a vibrant yellow dress, was holding court near the dessert table, her laughter ringing out as she teased Darius Moore about his dance moves. Jamal, healthier now, thanks to the paid-off medical bills, was chatting with Aunt Ruby, his grin wide as he recounted a story from school. Aisha's heart swelled at the sight her family, her roots all here to celebrate a new beginning. Marcus appeared at her side, his navy suit tailored but relaxed, his dark hair tousled by the river breeze. His blue eyes held her with a warmth that made her breath catch a softness that had grown since their first clash in Harlem. "You did this," he said, his voice low-laced with awe. "This place, these kids, you're giving them a chance." "Aisha, I'm just lucky to be part of it," she smiled, nudging his shoulder. "Don't get too sentimental, Reed. I'm still the girl who'll call you out." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that sent a flutter through her. The event was her vision, a community center named after her, funded by Marcus, but built on her dream of lifting up Harlem's youth. Tonight was its grand opening, and Aisha was set to speak, to share her story. But as she stepped to the podium, the crowd hushing, she felt Marcus's gaze steady and unwavering, grounding her. Thank you all for being here. She began, her voice clear, carrying over the rooftop. I grew up in Harlem where dreams can feel like they belong to someone else, but I'm proof they don't. I fought for my brother, for myself, for love. And tonight we're building a place where every kid can fight for their dreams too. The crowd erupted in applause. Keisha whooping loudly, and Aisha's eyes found Marcus, his smile proud and unguarded. She stepped down, her heart full, but the night wasn't over. Marcus took her hand, leading her to a quieter corner of the rooftop, where string lights formed a canopy, their glow mirroring the city's sparkle, the river's soft lapping mixed with the distant hum of hip-hop, creating a cocoon around them. Aisha, he said, his voice trembling slightly, a rarity for a man who'd faced boardrooms and scandals without flinching. There's something I need to show you. He guided her to a small plaque on the wall engraved with her name. Aisha Coleman Center, where dreams rise. Below it was a quote from Maya Angelou, one Aisha had read to Jamal during his hospital stays. You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled, touching the plaque. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. I don't need the world to know my name. But I do, Marcus said, turning her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I need them to know you're the woman who changed me, who made me want to be better. He paused, his breath catching, and dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Aisha's heart stopped, the world narrowing to the man before her. The lights, the river. He opened the box, revealing a simple pearl ring, its luster soft but radiant. Like her Aisha Coleman, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I thought love was a game I'd never play. But you're my fire, my home, my everything. Will you marry me? So I can spend my life proving I'm worthy of you. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't hesitate. She thought of their journey from Harlem's neon nights to Miami's storms, from Memphis's blues to Portland's rain. She thought of her mama, of the promise she'd once feared breaking, and realized Marcus was the man she'd been waiting for. Yes, she said, her voice steady, pulling him to his feet. But on one condition. You love me as your equal, not something you won. He smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, its weight a perfect fit. Always, he whispered, and kissed her deep and fierce, as the crowd erupted in cheers, Keisha's voice rising above the rest. That's my girl. Jamal clapped. Ruby wiped a tear, and Darius nodded, his smile warm. The string lights glowed brighter. The river sang, and Aisha felt her heart settle whole. At last, the wedding came a month later, a small affair at a Brooklyn loft overlooking the East River, its windows open to the September breeze. Aisha wore a white silk gown, simple but elegant, with tiny jasmine flowers woven into her curls. Marcus, in a classic black suit, waited at the altar, his eyes sparkling like she was the only star in his sky. Jamal, grinning wide, served as best man, while Keisha and Ruby fussed over Aisha's dress, their laughter filling the room. Darius, now a friend, to both sat in the front row, his presence a quiet support. The ceremony was intimate, overflowing with love. Aisha and Marcus exchanged vows under a canopy of fairy lights, their words weaving a future. I vow to fight for you, Aisha said, her eyes locked on his through every storm. Because you're my home. Marcus's voice trembled as he replied, I vow to love you, Aisha, with my heart, my soul, because you're everything I never knew I needed. They kissed, the crowd cheering, and Aisha felt her mama's presence, a gentle approval in the breeze. That night, in a penthouse suite above the loft, The city's lights spilled through the windows, mingling with the silver glow of the moon. The East River whispered below its rhythm, a soft counterpoint to the quiet of the room. Aisha stood by the window, her silk slip clinging to her skin, the fabric catching the moonlight. Marcus approached his shirt, unbuttoned, his eyes filled with love and longing. "Mrs. Reed," he murmured, his voice, a caress. "You're more beautiful than any dream." She smiled, stepping toward him, her fingers tracing his jaw. "You're not so bad yourself," she teased, but her voice softened. "I broke my mama's promise for you, Marcus, and I'd do it again." He caught her hand, kissing her palm, his lips warm against her skin. The room was a sanctuary, the moonlight painting her curves, her curls in silver and shadow. He pulled her close, his hands sliding to her waist, the silk slip a whisper under his touch. Their kiss was slow, deliberate, a dance of lips and breath that deepened with each moment. The moonlight bathed them, highlighting the rise of her chest, the curve of his shoulders. His kisses trailed to her neck, her collarbone, each one a vow, his hands roaming her back, tracing the lines of her body. "Aisha," he whispered, his voice thick. "You're my everything." Her fingers tangled in his hair, her body arching into him, the river's song blending with their breaths. The silk slipped to the floor, a soft rustle against the hardwood, and they moved to the bed, their bodies entwining in a rhythm as old as the stars. The moonlight was their witness, the city, their chorus, and as they joined body and soul, Aisha felt a truth settle in her bones. This was love, eternal and unbroken. They lay afterward wrapped in each other, the moonlight gracing her face. Marcus held her close, his voice a whisper. "You're my home, Aisha, forever." She rested her head on his chest, his heartbeat blending with the river's pulse, and smiled. "And you're mine," she said, her voice soft but sure. The next morning, Aisha and Marcus stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, the city sprawling before them, alive with possibility. The community center was thriving. Jamal was healing, and their love was a beacon. Aisha thought of her journey, of Harlem's neon, Miami's storms, Memphis's blues, Portland's rain, and now Brooklyn's light. She'd fought for her family, her pride, her heart, and found a love worth every battle. "We're not perfect," she said, her hand in Marcus's, "but we're us, and that's enough." He kissed her forehead, his smile radiant. "More than enough," he said. As they walked into the sunrise, the city waking around them, Aisha knew they'd face whatever came together. Her mama's promise wasn't broken. It was fulfilled in a love that burned brighter than any neon, stronger than any storm.